Your main man, Andrew Wood, coming back with another video on campaign building. Now, I'm going to be talking about cities and towns. And cities and towns are something that's very, very important to think about, to put a lot of thought into when you're developing a campaign world. Because these are very likely to be the epicenter of your game, at least in particular, one city or a large town of some sort should be extraordinarily well detailed out. Now, this may vary depending on the sort of game you're running, the sort of campaign that you've put together. It may be one that takes place vastly out in the woods or underground or such, and what I'm saying might need to be modified ever so slightly. However, even places like the woods or under mountains can be great sources for creating interesting and unique cities. Cities don't have to reflect the sort of medieval version of a real-world city. Not at all, not in the least. Because remember, you have tools of divine and arcane magic at your disposal. You have vast and different sorts of races to bring together. So, one thing to think about also is the sort of architecture that you're going to have and to vary up your descriptions of architecture from place to place, from race to race, from culture to culture. Remember, two different groups of elves, one vastly in the north and one far in the south, are not going to have the same culture. They're not going to have the same architecture. They're going to be very different in their aesthetic choices. So that's something that you want to make sure that you bring across to make your game really pop with flavor when you start describing the style of your architecture. And particularly if you don't make it just really bland and sort of generic, if you give it, a lot of detail, and you can just do a little research there, looking up architectural designs and taking them and tweaking them and saying, okay, now we throw magic into the equation. Now we take a race that has a much greater connection to the earth than humans do. How does these things start to look a little bit different? And look at all the vast different architectural choices and designs that can be made, and start bringing that across. And even when you have a city, you may have different sorts of architecture. Another thing to think about is the history of the city. Who built it? And the people that built it may not be the ones that are there now. Perhaps an ancient elven city that's now run by roaming gnolls, or perhaps a little subtler. Perhaps it's a city built by dwarves. You see old dwarven architecture, but it's almost pure human city now, maybe 92% humans. And there's still just a small dwarven minority that's been shunned off to the ghettos and aren't in that sort of position. So, which brings me to another point. Make sure you think about what your demographics are. Think about what your races are, what the different cultures of each races are. You want to have different kinds of humans. You want to have different kinds of elves, different kinds of dwarves. Even if it's only subtle differences, those subtle ethnic differences between a dwarf from one side of the world and another, perhaps, in the middle in this large metropolis, and they're going to be different. Perhaps their language are different. Perhaps they look a little different. Perhaps they have other various characteristics that are not the same, and that can really come across to the players if you subtly keep putting that in a role-playing different. Like, why are these two dwarves different? And they start looking at it, and they go, wait a minute, they look a little different. That dwarf has orange eyes, and that dwarf has yellow eyes, and this dwarf's skin's a little darker, and this one's like half a foot taller. And then you see several others, and they start to mirror those characteristics, and you start, seeing those differences, and the same can come across in the city, the differences of design, of style, of choice. Now, when you're detailing a major campaign point, say you have a city that the players keep coming back to over and over and over again, a main campaign point of the city, you need to detail that city out very well. You can go down to the fine points of drawing a map of it street by street, position by position, who lives where, how everything looks, where's the cemetery, where's garbage disposed of, is there some sort of underground sewage, water runoff area, do they use aqueducts here, are you right on even the large things like being right on a river, where is the food coming from, what kind of food do they eat, and bring those cultural details in and how they vary from season to season. That's something, when you start bringing those sort of details, and these people eat frogs. Frog is a very common delicacy in the early spring to summer here. These large bullfrogs, and the players are like, because that's not something in America that we normally eat. In most parts of America, maybe in Louisiana, but overall, it's not a normal thing. However, people do, and you can eat frogs. I've eaten frog before, and it tastes fine. It's not the best thing in the world, but it tastes fine. And you bring a detail like that the players aren't like, immediately going to be, oh, that's our culture. Oh, it's a little different. Well, yeah, I guess my character would eat a frog. They start thinking about that, or you push a little further off. You have, those ideas of trade. What is being traded there? Why is it such a large city? Is it on a strategically good position for defensive purposes? Is it in a great position for trade? And those are the two things you really need to look at from military strategic point. Is this well fortified, or is this a good place for trade? And the great trade places are typically going to be on a large river or on the coast where you can get things to them very easily. Of course, there are going to be plenty of reasons you can have exceptions to that. Small trading posts that's grown up over the years. Perhaps it was originally started for furriers and lumber and has continued to grow and grow and grow and build. It's just in the middle of what essentially would have been nothing, but things have grown up there. And you put that backstory why there's a big city. They always have a reason, Maybe it's a city that was originally built by gnomes on the foot of these massive mountains, and that's where they kept selling all their gems and their gold and all this different ore, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and slowly you have integration of more races in there, and the city continues to grow. So think about that in terms of the history of your city, in terms of, what is being traded there, what are they importing, what are they exporting, what things are going to be useful to them, and that may even be something the players do on the side. They go, ooh, we know, if we go over to City 2 with goods from City 1, we can make a little extra money here. And you may well have players do things like that. I've had players do that before that are paying attention to the game. They say, oh, that would totally make sense. My character might actually logically attempt to make honest money instead of just murdering things and trying to take money that way. That can be a very legitimate way to handle that. Think about taxes. What sort of taxes might the city have? Do they charge you to get in? Do they charge you to get out? Do they charge you to bring horses in or wagons? Or do they charge you on some sort of sales tax? How do they handle that? What are the laws that are specific or perhaps different? Is the city itself a city-state, or is it part of a larger country? Who rules? What sort of rulership is it? And again, how does that affect the laws? How does that affect the players? Or people just like straight? It's like, oh, it's just straight because you're a lizard man and you're carrying a battle axe around. That's straight. Or they're like, oh, hell no, a lizard man and a dude with an axe? No. And the guards usher you off and end you in the river, or at least put you the cold shoulder and kick you on out of town, because they're not looking to have a man with an axe and a lizard man just roll up into their town, or any other player character combinations that you can come up with, because guess what? Most PCs look like thugs. Most PCs are thugs. And how do they get that stuff? Well, we went out and murdered a bunch of people and took these things off them. I don't know, I want you in my town, so think about that in reflection to how the town reacts to them, how in general, people are going to react to PCs in just the general way they are, plate mail wearing, longsword wielding, shield toting knight might be a little off-putting, and he certainly might be a little off-putting if he's not the race of that area. And they go, we don't know about that, Another thing to think about are temples, particularly, and you can go off and into all these small towns and cities and such, but I really want to focus on really making a large sort of capital destination for your PCs to come back to over and over again. So think about what temples are there. The ones that are easily found just by walking around, asking a tour guide, asking people, making gather information rolls and such. Okay, these 8 gods are represented here with temples, and then go into making NPCs. Okay, who are the priests? In my case, I'll make every single one. I'm going to get pictures for every priest in every temple, because I love to use temples in games. They add so much flavor. I like to have the detail of what could you buy at that. Do they sell potions? Well, yeah, they have certain potions, these types. So this temple doesn't. This temple, maybe you can buy like some really weak wands and such. I like to have very low magic items in my game, but think about that. Maybe you like to have higher magic items. And so think about what kind of items they might have for sale, because if you do have magic items for sale, your players are probably going to want to buy them at some point if you have enough cash. So it's a good thing to think about. Also, when you have those priests and priestesses well detailed out with pictures and stuff, you should start making those relationships. The players can say, oh, is there something we can do for the temple? Particularly if they've gone in there and they've been taken care of, they've been healed, maybe one of them's been raised from the dead or something, they should start being like, oh, thanks for raising from the dead, that's straight though. And that's a video I plan to do, because that just pisses me off. people nonchalant the most epic of spells in the game. But that's something that can really get over, and those are great NPCs to develop. The people that are in charge of temples, even the small levels, and the players can see a small acolyte is maybe a few levels higher than them when they start at first level. 10 years later in the game when they're high level characters, they can see that person has also grown in power. And then, you can have in a church, you can let them see the politics. You can let them see what's behind the veil just a little bit and, sprinkle those elements in over and over again, particularly if you're dealing with maybe a less savory sort of church. And in that regard, there are, of course, in most major cities, temples to evil gods. But where are they? Well, that's something to really be thought about. If you have an underground area, that might be a place. It might just be a building in any section of the town, whether high scale or lower class, where no one is going to suspect that. They have a false cover. Perhaps it's in a basement. Perhaps, it's simply in someone's home and they convert it in to have rituals. Or perhaps they do it out in the woods or something like that. So you have this insidious cult and the players can get involved with it either in a way where they're facilitating it or putting an end to it with torches and blades, depending on what sort of characters and sort of game you're running. Just going through my notes here, making sure I touched on everything. Of course, like I said, you can draw maps, and in drawing maps, you can write out street names, you can write out, different quarters, and detail where everything is. Now, you don't have to be a great artist. I am not a great artist, but I can sit down and do, enough details. And hell, you can just draw little basic shapes and go, okay, this box, and this box, and this box in lines. And anyone that is an adult that doesn't have some sort of problem with their arm, they don't have nerve damage or something like that, is going to be able to draw boxes and lines. And that's really all it comes down to. It doesn't have to be a masterwork piece of art. And you don't even need to show it to your players. It's sort of a thing for you to keep track of. Okay, well, you guys are going down this road, and you come up here, and you start describing what's there, and you have your little write-ups. You can remember how to describe the temple from the outside, how to describe the Huntsman's Guild, how to describe the palace, how to describe your taverns. And tavern names are really a good thing to have. There's a number of books that have great inside write-ups with both taverns and temples, which I really recommend. Having floor plans for that stuff is great. But, you can create that stuff for yourself as well. Having a tavern name that you clearly just pulled out of your ass is a bad thing. If you can put together taverns, restaurants, inns, and have a list of those, and just like, okay, you can write down, 60 names or something, 20 for each, for example. And the players can go back, okay, we really like staying at the Purple Unicorn. That was really great. We liked Raoul, the bartender in there. We like that character. We want to go back there. And again, you can start building those relationships and then you can use that to kind of show the passing of time as things change. As you can illustrate, once those NPCs are established, that the world itself is moving, and Raoul, the bartender, is doing things while the players aren't there. He's not just sitting there going, the PCs come back, because otherwise they don't get to exist. You don't ever want to show that because, it's just like cardboard. You blow it a little hard and the whole world collapses. You don't want to do that. And by developing the city, by developing the NPCs and the structure there, the creating an infrastructure for your city, you can really have a real feeling. And in those relationships that they make with people that are, they might latch on all sorts of NPCs there too. And you say, Jacob the Stable Boy. Well, you didn't have his name written down, but you can. Oh, Jacob the Stable Boy. All right, Blair's character really likes him. Okay, cool. We'll bring it back next time, and she can do more with Jacob the Stable Boy. That's straight. But that's another thing to keep in track. Always write everything down in your notebook so you don't come back and go, I don't remember what it was. Because as a game master, as soon as you say that, man, boy, your players will lose all kinds of respect, man. That's a bad place to be. Work definitely pays off, and that's kind of what I want to get across with the series here. Another aspect is festival days. Think about, when the festival days of the city are, and you can work that in your calendar if they happen to come into a certain place. And they have that festival, then the players go, oh, yeah, that festival, right, the calendar, okay. And they really enjoy that midsummer festival, so they want to go back every year to that area, and that can become a a campaign thing where one person's like, "Oh, yeah, we gotta start making our way back." Yeah, I know. We were gonna go explore this dungeon, but we really want to get into this festival. This festival is great. This is very important to us. Um, think about who the guard is, what kind of guard they have in the city, how they act, how they're going to be towards adventurers. Or if you have a drunken barbarian in the party, are they just going to thump him, grab him, toss him in there, charge him a little money, and let him out the next day when he sobers up? Or are they going to hang him? Are they going to impale him? Or is there going to be an encounter? Um, are they of large quality, so many that no group could take them? Or is it, a small enough group that the players, might be able to squash all of them, or at least deal with that squad and get away? And then, of course, you go back into laws, wanted posters, bounty hunters, all sorts of other things when people do that. And once you establish laws, you have to make sure you're enforcing them. Otherwise, again, it becomes very, very cardboard, and you really don't want that. Think about the population size of your city. In all ways, think about why there is a city there as opposed to somewhere else. What makes that piece of real estate special enough to hold a city? And there's a vast number of reasons for that, some of which are already delineated. Now, that's basically just talking about the city, the big capital base, not to say capital in terms of capital of a nation or a city-state capital is of any particular importance, other than that's sort of where the PCs are based out of. That's where a lot of the game is going to take place. Now, of course, you might have a game that just goes that way in a line, but you kind of want to bring it back around, because then you can show growth. When it just goes like that, you lose a lot in the game. You lose a lot in terms of role-playing quality, in terms of quality NPC relationships, because if everyone just kind of disappears as you just go, that, or up, so always try to come up with reasons to bring it back, and you should. People, and I've seen that kind of D&D gamer just, no one will ever appear again, and that's bad. That's bad for any kind of fantasy role-playing game. You want to go back to places. You want to go back to people. You want to go back to the familiar. In real life, people do that. They always, all people are always going to be coming back around to different places where they feel comfortable to what they've found. So that's, an important thing to keep in mind in terms of realism. Now, you also want to have other towns. You don't want to just, boom, there's just one place. There's just only the city and what's immediately around it. No, have others. I mean, hell, for me, in terms of campaign building, I'm taking everything I've just told you of this city, and I'm doing it over into this city, and over on this city, and over on this city, and over on this city. I'm doing it on every single city on the continent. And then I'm going to go to the next continent. I'm going to do that one. I'm going to go to the next continent. I'm going to do that one. In my campaign, we're only on 3 continents. But I'm going to make sure all the cities are there. Now, you don't have to do every single town in that level of detail, but you should do a bunch in that level of detail, because towns are very small. It might be simple agriculture. They might just be shepherds. They might just be lumberers. They may have just furrier trades, and there may just be a few of these things together where the people are drawing their income. Because remember, there has to be some way of income. That's very important, because, they're not just sitting there. There's no welfare in D&D, so they're not sitting there collecting money without doing some work for it. Otherwise, they're starving, and, that's a whole different deal. Think about the frontier towns. Think about the towns that are near the cities, that are towns that have been there for a long period of time. How are they governed? What's going on? Do they have any temples there? Do they have any temples near them? Are there any inns there? There might not be. There might just be one inn out in the middle of nowhere. And you start really kind of fleshing out your whole campaign world in terms of that, in terms of towns and cities. And technically, there's a whole bunch of different words I can throw at you to delineate that, but you get what I'm saying. Small, large. And that's really what you want to think about in terms of your campaign world. Always think there has to be a reason for it there. There has to be some kind of income. And while there might be, the repetition of a blacksmith, because blacksmiths were really important, there might be, the repetition of several other trades like that. There shouldn't be a weapons store in the middle of an 18-person town. And you see it a lot of times in D&D. The weapons store. Oh, yeah, they're the magic shop. Yeah, there's 18 people in this town. But yeah, they have a weapons store and a magic shop and 3 temples. Don't do things like that. No one is going to believe them. Unless there's a really good reason. Now, I mean, you could make good reasons for them, but just sloppy repetition and throwing down this sort of template of, well, what do we need there? And I'm pointing out bad examples that I've seen but I want to point this out to highlight that everything should be there for an organic or real reason. Think about those aspects, before you start running them in the game, and you're going to produce a game that's far more believable.